Hello, everybody. Hi, my name is Rajiv, and my pronouns are he, him.
And I'm Carly, and my pronouns are she, her. And welcome to the Queer Sober Social Podcast. We're a chill social group of LGBTQIA+ folks who want to do more with their lives than just drinking.
Whether you identify as in recovery, sober curious, or just wanted to be sober while you're listening in, we're happy that you're here. And with that, let's get started. Hello, hello, welcome, welcome. Today we have a very special guest on our podcast. A drum roll, please. Add in sound effects afterwards here. It's Sydney Bauer from the podcast Love Is Not. Please, Sydney, just introduce yourself. Let us know what your pronouns are and let us know what Love Is Not all about.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Sydney, and pronouns are she, her. I am the host of the podcast Love Is Not, which its subject matter is obviously the most fun. It's a podcast that explores relationship abuse. I am a survivor of relationship abuse, but I am also one that am very fortunate enough to feel comfortable talking about my experience, and that's something I wanted to share with others. And we like to call ourselves the surprisingly funny podcast about relationship abuse, although the topic hopefully, does not bring to the mind humor. But we really want to show that there's a life after abuse and that trauma. You can experience joy. And there are some really incredible people who are working to prevent abuse, heal from abuse, and we feature them on our podcast. So that is Love Is Not.
Hey, well, welcome, Sydney. We're so thrilled and grateful to have you here and your dating expertise on our podcast today. If you haven't already listened to our previous episode, which was Queer and Sober Dating 101, definitely give that a listen to for all of our queer and sober dating tips and tricks.
Well, today we're here to build on that conversation itself and build on really what comes afterwards, which is love. Especially since we're really close to Valentine's Day. Whether you believe in it or not, like we said last time, this is just keeping that love train going, right? We started with dating, now we're here at love, and here we are to talk about what love is.
Yes. So, Sydney, we're so excited to have you here. I'm first of all just curious about after all of your time and research that you've done discussing what love is not, do you feel like you've boiled it down a little bit to what love actually is?
Yes, I mean, I would hope so. I am fortunate enough to be in a very loving current relationship, so hopefully I'm on the right track. I think the easiest word to boil it down to is respect
Hmm.
towards the other person. It is a very heightened level of intimate respect. And I want to say respect versus like a strong feeling or like lovey-doveyness, because that can be really great and you can find that in any relationship, but it's not always going to be lovey-dovey, and it's important to respect who people are, to respect and understand their flaws. And I think boiling it down to respect really helps people get comfortable setting up boundaries within a relationship, which are really important to have. So if I were to come up with one word to like really get at the root, it is like very pure and intimate respect for the person or persons that you're with.
I think respect is such a good word to be able to describe a lot of the positive sides to love. Um, are you in the stuff that you do you distinguish the different types of love? Like, I'm not necessarily talking about like ancient Greek, that kind of type of love, but at least differences between even more like casual relationships or friend relationships or family relationships and what love looks like in those places? Or is it like solely dedicated to relationships that are more romantic in nature? Or supposed to be, I guess, in your case.
Yeah, yeah, and they still can be like abusive. There's like always those two sides that you see within abuse, regardless of what type of relationship. But yes, definitely. My personal experience is with like a romantic partner being abusive. Um, but we definitely on the podcast and in like all conversations and that I've had with other survivors and around the topic, it occurs in any type of relationship. And one of the distinctions that we also like to make is saying relationship abuse versus domestic violence, because domestic violence really brings in the idea of the home, and kind of brings to mind, a woman with a black eye from her partner, like as of that being related to that image, when abuse, just as you had said, Rajiv, um, can come about outside the home, outside the domestic sphere. And we definitely explore difficult familial relationships in the family. One that I think really needs to be explored more is platonic, because friends can definitely be toxic. And nobody really teaches you what those healthy relationships are supposed to look like. Work environments, also something that we explore, that I've explored with people, of how that can be toxic or abusive. Anywhere in which power can be held over another person. So, because that's really what the root of abuse is holding power over someone. So yeah, it comes up in all different forms of relationships.
It's unfortunate that it happens to show up in so many places, but also important to call out that it does exist in different shapes and forms in those different types.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And what's also like kind of, it's weird to say it's helpful, but one of the things is, although that abuse and those types of behaviors can show up in all different types of relationships, there are trends no matter what type of relationship it is. Like an abuser, or somebody who perpetuates that type of behavior, it might not be exact behaviors, but it's a trend. Like jealousy is a very big trend. Being controlling is a trend. And so the behaviors themselves kind of can be seen as a through line, through all types of relationships, although the specific behaviors might be different. The kind of like, it's still diagnosable, and similar across different relationships in that sense.
Is so interesting. Thank you, Sydney, for sharing. I think respect, what it really boils down to, that's huge. Especially the reason we wanted to talk about this is because, all right, we talked about how to date. And then as you're starting to date and as you're starting to, get to know someone, it's really important to suss out, okay, how am I being treated? Do I feel good in this relationship? Where is this going? Am I headed in a good direction? And to be in control of that and to look for signs and signals, it's all really important to know what is love and what is not, and what you're willing to accept and what you're not, and being able to speak up and do something about it. Something I'm curious about and that we'd like to talk about in our group is love languages. And I don't know if you are familiar with that, or if you talk about like matching up with your love languages. And you don't have to necessarily have the same love language as your partner. There's just like the communication that goes into sharing what's important to you, and then hearing back what your partner and what's important to them, and how to bridge that gap sometimes.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I think talking about love languages is something very interesting, and something I have definitely done. I've taken that test like multiple times of like, what is your love language? And I think normalizing those conversations between partners, of being able to say, this is my love language. This, like, when I do things like this, that is me trying to show that I care about you. And it was a really interesting, I have an interesting dynamic in my current relationship. I am a very emotional person. I'm not super into horoscopes, but to put it out there for people who are, I'm very much a Cancer. I was born at the end of June, very emotional. I wear them on my sleeve. And my current partner, he is the exact opposite. He's probably seen me cry on a weekly basis of like the almost, I don't know, 3 years that we've been dating, and I have yet to really see him cry. Not to say he's emotionally unavailable, but we're able to verbalize that, of like, hey, I notice like you are much calmer. I am attracted to that. That's really helpful for me. And he has been kind enough to share with me of like, you have unearthed emotion, or how to provide empathy for people. So it's like, it's a really complementary relationship, and parts of those conversations are love language. Like, I'm an acts of service person. I want to do acts of, like, I want to do things for you. I'm the person who will drive you to the airport. Like, if you need help, I want to be there. And for him, sometimes words of affirmation are more important. And keeping those in mind and opening that communication really helps us maintain that love in the relationship and know what to expect from each other.
I love that so much. Thank you for sharing about yourself and your partner. And I'm definitely also a words of affirmation person, but I love to be able to have it backed up with some quality
Mhm.
time. So, like, those two paired together is like the perfect mix for me. But, you have to know yourself, take that quiz for sure,
Yes.
and be able to, figure out what that means to you and communicate it. So, that's really awesome that you have done so.
Yeah.
Another thing that we talk about at length in our sober queer community is identifying red flags, but we also like to make an effort to point out what green flags are and, to provide a contrast like we've already started doing so far of good things to look for and maybe some, yellow or red flags. So
Yeah.
I really, really like talking about green flags because I feel like that's a conversation that doesn't get discussed as much. How do you know when a partner is doing something great that you should be on the lookout for, that they're able to communicate things? So I would love to dive a little bit deeper into that with you all in this conversation.
Let's do it.
For sure. I mean, we get a sense of just we already have a sense, like most people who have been in relationships have a sense of what those big red flags are. And so maybe we can start with the green flags
Mhm.
and then use that to contrast that against some of those yellow and red flags that everybody has a sense for.
Yeah. I think, at least for me, a very big um, green flag, and this is obviously a very like specific thing to me. But if a green flag is if I share something about myself, for example, like sharing with a partner that I had a bad experience previously, that I really can judge what's going to be like a yellow or a red or a green flag based on their reaction.
Mm.
And getting the reaction of being like accepted and tell me more, or them not treating me differently afterward. That to me is a very big green flag and shows like I'm going to accept you as you are. And as I learn more things about you, it just means I'm going to love you like in those ways and based off of those things that I learn. So to me, that is a very big green flag that has helped me in my relationships. Yeah.
Agreed. I think so often that we look at green flags or red flags in terms of what the other person is doing. But sometimes, like what you're saying, is to like flip the script and be like, how is the other person making me feel? Is that a
Mhm.
green flag of how I want to be feeling? Or are they making me feel a way that I don't want to feel? So it's like flipping it back onto you and how not necessarily being like these actions that the other person is doing, but how do I want to feel in a relationship? Do I want to feel secure? Do I want to feel like I can share intimate things about myself and not feel judged? Then yeah, these are things to look out for in the green flag area. If we want to go to more specific actions, we did compile, flipping it into the more sober queer realm, some green flags for our fellow sober queers out there. I would say is somebody that is queer themselves or is a queer ally, is knows about the queer community, or at least is willing to learn about the queer community and not make, well, we'll go into the red flags with that. But in terms of sobriety as well, maybe somebody that is sober, that would be a green flag because they understand your lifestyle. Or, maybe if they're not sober, they at least respect your sobriety, is somebody that you feel comfortable being sober around, or that you could share if you're feeling uncomfortable in a situation where there's a lot of alcohol. Like those are huge green flags for sure. Something we talked a lot about last episode is somebody who respects your boundaries, and that's after you set them and they don't question them. They respect your boundaries, whether that be time boundaries, if you have to leave at a certain time or you like to go to bed at a certain time, whether that's COVID boundaries, if you feel like you want to wear a mask and stay 6 feet apart, they're respecting of that. They're not going to try and push you and be like, no, like we're not doing that. That would be a little concerning. Whether it comes to communication, if you like to text every day, if you want to talk on the phone once a week, like, just respecting what your boundaries are. Don't call you after a certain time, all that good stuff. Just being like, you put it out there and they're like, okay, that's your boundary. And like, I'm going to abide by that. I'm not going to push your limits.
Yeah.
Like what back to what you were saying, somebody that genuinely listens to you when you speak and they want to know more about you. It's just someone that can listen to your emotions, or you feel like you can share your emotional side and just really be honest about how you're feeling. Another green flag for me personally, someone that has, their own therapist, is doing work on themselves, has outside social support, has like a good friend group, has a community, whatever that is, just so that I know like I'm just a pillar in somebody's life. I'm not their whole world. I'm not their whole life. Like there has to be like a variety of things going on because I can't be the foundation holding up another person's life. Like that's not going to work out for me. So knowing that they have other things going on, all of those are green flags for sure. So is there anything else that either of you would like to add to the green flag list?
I would say, just kind of Carly, going off of what you had mentioned earlier, as this being not something that people talk about a lot. One thing that I have learned is like, especially through therapy, I was fortunate enough to be in therapy when I was in the abusive relationship, and this is something that I learned as just a good like to do in a relationship, is when you see those green flags, also use, for all those psych majors out there like myself, positive reinforcement. So one thing that I try to make a habit of is like I'll tell my partner, the day after I had like a mental breakdown or something, or he was really kind to me or helped me out with something, I will tell him like, I really appreciated how you supported me in that moment. And lo and behold, he continues to support me that way. And like it kind of establishes those behaviors, and it's you're not told as much. It's kind of the to tell people when they're doing things well. You think of feedback as something that's negative, and sometimes it is, but it's also really great to give a partner positive feedback. It feels weird at first, but it becomes something that's really lovely to do. Yeah.
I mean, as long as we're not ringing bells and people are starting to salivate, like I'm good. Like, um, I think that
Yeah,
there
it doesn't have
is,
to be Pavlovian.
yeah. I think it all really boils down to what you were saying before, Sydney, and it's just around respect in different dimensions. Because there's like respect for either like your own sexual orientation or respect for lifestyle choices that you've made or like your own time or whatever. Um, and then there's also the point that you just brought up around like just respect for your partner, like whatever that might look like, and providing them the feedback and the support that they might be looking for or that they don't really get to get insight into without your help or your ability to express that directly, which I think is a really interesting way to think about some of these green flags is, like we said before, we're flipping the script a little bit in the sense of it's not just about what the other person is doing, but also what you can do to support the partnership that you are building.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think you bring up a great point, Rajiv, in that in order to be able to have respect for another person, I think a lot of the green flags are rooted in having respect for yourself. And if you're not sure of how to look for if you're being respected, it has to come from within. So, we always say it's not that you can't date until until you're absolutely ready, but it's to work on these things within yourself so that you're able to identify them in another person and you provide that for somebody else. So working on that's definitely a great place to start so that it's able to be mirrored and given back in a great fashion when you're in a relationship.
For sure. And before we move on, are there any other green flags or anything that we might want to discuss before we start veering into less than green territory?
I think we've listed like a lot of great things so far, and if anything else comes up along the way, we can drop them in here.
For sure. And if there's anybody that might be listening in live or in chat or anything like that, feel free to share some in the chat as well. Um, as we move on, like some of the other things that we wanted to talk about were around yellow and potentially red flags. And those are the things that you don't think really should be in the relationship itself. Whether that's crossing a really hard limit and that's like a deal breaker or like a really, really hard line to say no, or if that's just like that didn't feel really great, like let's not do that moving forward type of thing. Both of those fall in the same sort of category where it's starting to like tread a little bit outside of the realm of respect. And so some of the things that we came up with or that we might want to talk about were things like if the person is getting defensive with their relationship with alcohol, for example. That's something that at least I personally have seen is that people, by virtue of even just bringing up the fact that you might be sober or you don't drink, all of a sudden have to like defend themselves, which to me feels a little weird. Like it may not be like them trying to defend some level of alcoholism or something that's super rough, but it can also just be they're not comfortable enough in accepting your sobriety or your decisions not to drink versus their own. And that's something that I find is slightly more of a yellow flag. Um, Something else that I also have seen is people making you insecure or like starting to make you question your own queer identity. So in a similar vein, like if you're in queer spaces or you identify as queer in the first place, like you've probably done a good deal of self-reflection and some exploration of your own. And you have a good sense of like how solid your own identity is. And so if somebody comes up and then starts making you question that again, that can feel really like uncomfortable because all of a sudden you're now questioning things that you may have taken literally years to figure out, or a lot of work or a lot of conversations, and then somebody starts to shake the rocky foundation, which is never really a comfortable feeling. Another thing that we brought up was just around like love bombing or fetishizing. So we talked about it, I think, last time, where like you can sort of be chasing after somebody for their some sort of identity that they might hold, or like you might be smothering them in terms of just somebody coming onto you really, really fast without even just having that level of communication with you to match up speeds a little bit. Those sorts of things I think also fall into that category. On the other side, there's like people who might just shame you about whatever needs or wants that you have. They may just completely gaslight you in terms of something that you've seen before or that you have noticed. And so in those instances, that feels a little bit more egregious because it's something that's just like, all right, well, I, as the person who is gaslighting you, don't want you to trust your own memory or don't want you to trust your own like experiences for something. And that feels like like that's now crossing a lot of lines. And then something that's like a lot less intense is somebody who might just take forever to get back to you communicating. So like you said, and I think this is a little bit of just the modern game playing that people tend to do in dating. And then some of this is just people who are just bad at communicating. Where like if your preference is to like get a good night text every day or something like that, and then they aren't willing to do that, like that can feel like, okay, you're probably not gelling perfectly. Or at the same time, like if you've texted something and then they take like a week to get back to you, like that's probably indicative of something else. So like all of those sorts of things start falling outside of the realms of what we had. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I would also say, I know you had mentioned love bombing kind of, and it's a very popular phrase that is used in discussions around abuse. And I would almost categorize that as a red flag of it's at least in kind of like abusive relationships. Obviously, if somebody they're like not mutually exclusive. Like you can love bomb someone without being an abuser. It just happens to also be a tactic that is used to offset the bad behavior. And so it also like in a way is a red flag if you find that at the red, yellow, orange flag maybe. Are there flags like that maybe?
Sure.
A caution
I know.
a caution cone, who knows, um, of like, okay, this isn't sustainable of like being like lovey-dovey all the time, or of that kind of that overwhelming feeling. What will this relationship, if it continues, look like when that stops? And so I think it's an important thing to note of, if you see that really early on, that is something to like keep note of if you continue to see that person, of like, oh, this, like, know in your heart that it's not sustainable to get that amount of love all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, I could talk forever about love bombing, I feel like, but if you're in a vulnerable place and you're not feeling
Mm.
so good about yourself, that is the thing that feels so good about being love bombed, which is just somebody coming on so fast and just saying like really intense things for somebody that barely knows you. And I think you can feel deep down in your gut, like, how do they even know enough about me to start saying all these things? But I'm so desperate for this like affection that I'm willing to overlook the red flag or the yellow flag or the orange flag and accept this for right now. So your gut instinct is there and it's telling you the right thing, but maybe you're in a little bit of a vulnerable spot. So it's good to know that about yourself of like, hey, I can feel my intuition trying to talk to me, but am I going to listen to it or not?
Yeah.
I think something really important is to call out the fact that like the green flags that we talked about, if they're more oriented to yourself, can actually help you find these yellow and orange and red flags a lot quicker. So if you've done the work to like work on your own self-esteem or work on your own ability to love yourself or whatever that might look like, and then all of a sudden somebody's like love bombing you out of nowhere. Like that's pretty. It's going to be a lot more obvious because you've done the work to recognize your symptoms in your own self, and then all of a sudden you see somebody else trying to do the same thing. You're like, nah, I I spent months to try to work on that. Not going to let that fly here.
Yeah, I think also it's important, and we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but if somebody makes you question yourself, that's a pretty big yellow flag. And what can be difficult is sometimes they'll find it could be like a very small sentence. Like I don't know if you've ever discussed or researched of where the phrase gaslighting came from. I don't know if it came from a movie. It's a black and white movie, so I think it came out in the 50s or 60s. It's called Gaslight, and in the movie, there's a heterosexual couple, and the man continues to turn down the lights in their house. And so his partner, his wife, is like, "Is it darker in here?" And he's like, "No, we haven't changed the lights." And it's something that he like continues to do, and that's like a very perfect, physical example of what gaslighting is. Is if you find yourself thinking like, "Wait, that's not how that interaction else and they described it," or like, "Wait, I don't think it happened that way," that's something to like take note of that. Like that's a little yellow of like if you feel you're questioning yourself even in small situations of like, "Oh, I didn't see it that way," or "That didn't happen," and you're like, "Wait a second, am I did I create a memory or something?" Like knowing how to trust yourself, which is very hard to do in those situations with someone you love. But yeah, that's when it kind of mixes in that yellow flag um, area. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Honestly, thanks for giving us the background on that. This
Mhm.
whole conversation of red flags and yellow flags has kind of really reminded me of the conversation that AOC had on her Instagram live about what the government is doing to her and trying to minimize her experience of what happened on the Capitol. And she's straight up is in her live saying, these are tactics that abusers use. And she's not wrong. And that's in the realm of just a working relationship. And these can show up anywhere, especially to
Mhm.
tie it back to queerness or sobriety. You could have a potential person in your life that you're looking to date, or even just a friend being like, hey, like, were you really even that bad? Like, you could definitely have a drink, or like, you should like totally come out with us tonight, or just, these little like jabs, but they
Mhm.
can still hurt. And it's still just like what Rajiv said, if you've done the work on yourself to figure out a sober lifestyle, to figure out that you're very confident in your identity in the queer community, and to have somebody like just come up and try to make you question that or make you feel like you don't know what you're talking about when it's your own life, it's your own self. It's like, wait a minute, I'm the right one in this situation. Like I'm the one that's grounded here. Like I can't handle somebody trying to throw me off my own horse. Like that's not
Mhm.
gonna work out. But it's difficult to recognize the signals, especially when a person that's gaslighting you is coming in the form of somebody that's very charming, or they mean well. So it gets a little bit cloudy or confusing because you feel confident and you're like, I want to match wits with this person, but they're saying things that are not making sense to me, things that I know deep down in my bones. So it gets a little tricky.
Yeah, and I have actually, especially when we had the 45th president in office, bringing up kind of AOC's live, which I watched that whole thing, and it was very very impactful. But it's like our country was in an abusive relationship with its government. It's really what it feels like. Of we have to depend on this person, and that's a very common thing in relationships. Of like depending on them for you're typically isolated in abusive relationships. Um, and if you don't have like a familial or platonic support, and if you translate to that, our government, like financially, like our society depends on this government, so we have to like be in this relationship, but they're not treating us the way we should be. And I think it also really speaks to how AOC had said that trauma can compound. So like she had discussed some previous traumas, and they really build upon each other. And I think It's also important reflecting a little on what you had just said, Carly, too, of like, even if they're little small things or if they're small, like yellow flags, one thing I always like, it was probably my therapist in college who first said this to me, but like a pound of feathers and a pound of bricks weigh the same. So even if it's like little feathers, like, your partner makes little comments, but they've made 1,000, they make them every day. That's still, you don't have to be physically hurt or, you know, physically touched or abused for that to build and compound upon each other. Which is why even if there are small little actions, it weighs the same as a larger one. And I think speaks to, like, once you see a feather, hold on to it. Take note of the feather, even though it might seem harmless at the time.
I think these are all very important things to watch out for. Before we maybe round out this section, we did get a chat in from Julie, and she says, I can totally relate to that, Carly. I've experienced love bombing by a former friend, and I didn't recognize how confusing and odd it really is until I was out of that friendship and quite a bit of time after that friendship ended. So, in addition to this whole like piece of confusion around either like lots of teeny tiny things that add up over time, or this level of gaslighting, which is like a really scary thing to do, or even just something like love bombing, it can feel very confusing to even have that happen to you in the first place. So, definitely can recognize that, Julie. Thanks for sharing.
Absolutely. And I think too, when it comes down to it, I know we're talking about flags for that other people are doing to you, but I agree with Sydney that even different relationships can compound over time. So if you've had a negative relationship experience and you're coming out of that, it's very easy to fall into something that's very similar or that looks a little bit different, but it's still not serving you in the ways that it's supposed to, or is with somebody that's emotionally unavailable. It can just like be this pattern. So it's really important that as much as we're like giving tips to look for in other people, it's really important to look back at yourself because you are the common denominator of these relationships. And as hard as that might be for some of us to hear, you are your own best asset. These are like experiences that you can learn from. So just take a look at yourself, take a look at the similarities of the relationships. And if you could redo them again, like what are things that you could have looked back at that maybe you should have paid more attention to that you let slide under the cracks? Because oftentimes when you do look back, there are so many signs and things that you're like, oh, okay, like if only I had looked at this or if I had paid attention to this and like collected the feathers along the way. And so, using every single experience that you have, whether it's romantic or with friends or family, as a learning tool is like a really great way to do some self-reflection to avoid these negative experiences from happening to you in the future. Power yourself.
Yeah. Making sure you're holding on to your autonomy, and agency within any relationship. And I think one of the really great ways to do that, of Carly, you talking about, I just realized I'm wearing a Wrigley Field shirt and everything behind me is Cubs. So in case anyone was wondering, I'm a Cubs fan. But um, of one of the things that was really hard for me when I was in a relationship, is if you're being gaslighted, and you're the only person you have to kind of like check that with is yourself. That can be one of the ways. I mean, that's a tactic to keep somebody isolated, but of having a confidant, a friend, or a family member, or a therapist, that you can say like, "Hey, this happened between me and my partner. Me and my partner is like, it feels a little weird to me, and I need a gut check. I need to check it with someone, and that's okay to do." And it's also really important. One of the ways that was really helpful for me to get out of that relationship is starting to tell people what I was going through, and then getting the response of, "Yeah, that's not normal." Because you're in it and you have your rose-colored glasses on, and you're dating this person, and you're attracted to them most likely, or in some cases, and it's good to have a community that you can kind of check that with, um, in that reflection. Yeah.
I mean,
It's an amazing tip. I couldn't agree more. And there's so many other things that we'll talk about right now as we round out this episode of what to do with this information. Like we've talked in depth of green flags, red flags, but how do we kind of sum it all together? And I think having a community behind you, said Sydney, like is an amazing tip. At least having one other person that you can, bounce ideas off of or just be completely honest and vulnerable with, because that's so huge
Yeah.
outside of your partner. Because, like you said, it's such a tactic to make it feel like you have nobody else in the world except for that one person. So that's a great place to start.
Exactly.
Rajiv, what were you going to say?
I was just gonna say it was a BoJack Horseman quote. When you're wearing rose-colored glasses, all the red flags just look like flags, right? So uh, maybe as we move into this next section about
Yep.
things to do, one of the easiest things to do is take off those rose-colored glasses. That might help you out there.
Yeah, or like what's that quote? When somebody shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Like that's so hard to put into practice, but if you really think about it, like you are seeing somebody you just you know in your gut. And that's part of our tips here is, trust your intuition, start listening to it. It's a tiny voice, but the more that you listen to the whispers that are going on, that you're checking in with your body, because it will tell you everything that you need to know. If something does not feel right, you're gonna know. But it's up to you to like put the power back into your own hands and take control of the situation, and not feel like there's nowhere else to go, or that you're helpless, because you're not. You have that intuition always guiding you along the way. It's just a matter of listening to it.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, with that, we're going to give you some other things to think about and consider as well. The first thing while you're dating, and we talked about this a lot in the last episode as well, is not being afraid to use filters. Something that I was terrified to do for sure, because I wanted to be liked by everyone. And when I was sober and when I was queer, I avoided putting that in my like dating profile for so long. And it just took so much longer to get to the real people that I wanted to talk to, the real conversations I wanted to have, because I wasn't anybody out. I was just trying to cast a wide net, and that's so common. But at the same time, you're not filtering out people that you're gonna, not vibe with at all. So just, it takes time to get there. It takes time to be comfortable. But once you are, make those decisions. The apps are super easy to use in this way, where you can filter out people that use substances, where you can filter out people that, are straight if you would like to. Like there's all these options that you can make yourself feel more secure, more safe, and that you're looking for who you really want to actually be looking for. So on the other side of that is just putting your authentic self out there and just being you, not trying to be somebody else that other people want to, experience, but just being comfortable in your own skin and just like portraying that online, which is like definitely another skill. But if you're able to do that, you're gonna definitely, with your filters, are gonna end up with way better matches for yourself than you ever would doing anything else.
Setting those boundaries is okay. You don't like, there's this kind of idea I think of, you need to be polite, or like you need to be like nice to everyone or accepting to everyone, when like it's okay to have boundaries. It's okay that you don't just like mess with someone, and it's okay to have parts of yourself such as being queer or being sober, or for me, it would be like someone, you have to be okay with talking about trauma. Like that's something that I'm really looking for. And just because that isn't a requirement for somebody else that you might be interested in, it's not a bad thing that it's not going to work. You don't have to be, liked by everyone. You're not going to be. That's very hard for me because I'm very anxious socially and I want everybody to like me, but sometimes it's okay to just not click with someone.
For sure. I think it's like you can try to do that up front as well, where in addition to just having filters to not even meet somebody, you can try to find somebody uh, pretty quick and find some of those red flags pretty quickly. And so maybe it's on their profile, maybe it's in like the first conversation that you have with them. You can get a sense of what those would be, and then what sorts of questions, without maybe like directly getting at it, because there is still a social like pressure to quote unquote be nice. But you can find ways to still ask the sorts of questions that you'd be looking for,
Yeah.
and get the answers that you're looking for, even if it isn't like super direct. And you really, it just helps everybody not waste time. Because if you are trying to find somebody for whatever purposes, whether that's like a casual relationship or a serious one, if people are on the same page and you're both figuring it out and understanding each other a little bit better throughout this entire process. Like that's really important because why would you waste your time, especially valuable time, if you're now like in quarantine and trying to figure out that person? It takes forever to find somebody else. Like, why would you waste your time not talking to somebody when you know that there's somebody that is a better fit? And it isn't necessarily like you're constantly monkey barring to the next person thinking that there's always something better, but there is still a point where it's just very obviously not the right thing because you've had those conversations or you're finding some of those too many of those yellow feather, red, yellow flags, or it's too many of those like red flags. Um, so first of all, one quick stop right there. Lil Peep, thank you so much for following. Um, and we can continue on. Sorry.
Wait, actually, with that pause, my computer's gonna die in like just a couple seconds. So
Plug it in.
that. Can I go grab my charger? Would I be the worst guest ever if I did that? Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
No, no, please.
One
You're
sec.
the worst guest if you disappeared from our stream, so we need you here.
We'd be the worst hosts if we just kicked you off or something, right? So.
Well, thank you everyone for listening so far. This has been a really insightful episode, and I think we've given some really great tips. I'm so happy for Sydney's insight on everything we've discussed so far. But yeah, really just rounding it out, like just like everything we've said so far, just, determining what you're looking for so that you know if somebody's gonna be a match or not. Just not trying to be like all the things to all the people. Like if you're not into casual dating, you need to be comfortable with like swiping left or saying no to people that are asking for that. So it's very just much being comfortable, being grounded in who you are, trusting your intuition, finding the apps, the search methods that feel good to you, putting together a profile that feels authentic, and just being yourself and having fun. I think that's the last part too, is that dating is a fun process. It doesn't have to be pulling teeth. I know it can feel like that, especially in a pandemic. We're all here together. That's why we're talking about this. But if you can make it fun, if you can find apps that feel fun to you, if you can be authentic in a way that feels fun, have conversations that feel good and authentic and light, and like you're getting the kind of matches that you want, like all the power is in your control, and we're just here to help make it a little bit easier.
Any last words that you might want to add, Cindy, before we start wrapping up this episode and moving into our very famous now after show?
Yeah, no, it has been so lovely to chat, and I just if I can do anything for somebody who is listening, and like full disclosure, I can't um, fully empathize with the having to disclose that I'm a queer or that I am sober, but I can empathize with having something that you would want to tell a partner, or that will be a conversation. And if I can validate for everyone out there that it can be hard, it's okay if it's difficult. Sometimes it can, those things are heavy, and it's okay to take your time and find the right person to tell that to. And just because you have something to disclose to a partner or might complicate, by most society's standards, a relationship, that doesn't mean you're not deserving of love or damaged in any way. You are still who you are, just with different experiences after they happen. So if I can, I'm real big with validating. So if I can validate that experience for everyone, you are not alone in that feeling.
I think that's a great call out because we can definitely empathize and validate people's struggles with sobriety or their own queerness, but by no means are we like experts or people who can like help you solve all those problems completely.
Yeah.
So definitely, if we wanted to maybe point people to where you're at, how would we be able to do so?
So you can find Love Is Not on any streaming platform. I'm a Spotify user, no bias there. And so you can find us there. Our website is also loveisnot.org, and that will lead you to everywhere. And you can find us on social media, on all platforms, at Love Is Not Pod, POD.
Fantastic. Well, I think that this is probably where we should wrap up our episode as well. So make sure to subscribe if you haven't. You can give us a like on YouTube. You can press follow on Twitch. You can follow us on Spotify as well. We're also pretty popular on Apple Podcasts. Don't miss, just subscribe so you don't miss the next episode as it comes out, because we try to launch an episode every other week.
Yes, and you can find our podcast, just like Love Is Not, on all major platforms, and our video podcast lives at twitch.tv and YouTube. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Chicago Queer Sober Social if you are not already. And feel free to contact us at queersobersocial@gmail.com or leave us a voice message on our anchor page with any questions or stories that you'd love to share with us. We would be so happy to feature you on the pod. And I think that's everything for today. Sydney, thank you so much for being here. And thank you everybody for listening and for being here. And as always, please remember
You are queer enough.
you are sober enough.
You are enough. Before we move on to the after show, thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Thank you, Rights and Wrong Podcast, for also following. I hope you guys stick around for just a couple minutes. We're going to take a break for just a couple seconds for us to just reset. And then we will be moving into the after show, which is more focused on everybody chatting. And we'll have a chance to ask some more questions of Sydney and just be here to talk. So with that, let's maybe take a break and we'll see you in a couple minutes. Thanks.
Bye.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Thanks very much for your patience. We just wanted to take a quick break before we jump into this after show. I think it's been such a treat to have you, Sydney, as a guest. So thank you again for joining us. If you could maybe start us off in this section by talking a little bit more about like what is Love Is Not? I mean, I understand you gave a little bit of an intro there, but could you talk a little bit about either some interesting things that have come up for you or some things that you think might be useful for our audience of queer and or sober people?
Sure. Yeah. To kind of like start from the beginning, I very early on was thinking of um, making a documentary about my experience. I was in an abusive relationship in college, and am also a documentary filmmaker. So I'm like, let's make a personal doc. And then I had kind of come to the conclusion that it wasn't just my story that I wanted to share. There was more I wanted to do. And so had come to the idea of having a podcast for a couple of reasons. First, because it's sustainable, so I can have like more than just one documentary or one, film or short. And then also, given the subject matter, it felt the safest to have. So a couple things for listeners. If you hopefully, which you'll check out, our amazing, beautiful logos that we use, which credit to our social media team. and designers is a cassette tape, because I recommend songs in every episode, at the end of every episode, and we have a Spotify playlist also called Songs of Solace, because we love alliteration. And it's songs that are meant to, on all ends of the spectrum of like when songs that personally for me made me feel really good in relationships, to all the way like making me feel better if something bad had happened, or through that difficult experience. It's music that is meant to give comfort to somebody who's going through anything tough related to relationships. And we very specifically wanted to keep it a cassette tape, or something that it doesn't kind of scream abuse, so that if it's found by an abusive partner, um, you can easily protect yourself, and it doesn't look like you're, listening to a podcast trying to leave your partner. It also lends itself to anonymity, which, oh my God, yes, I said that word right. I usually say animosity by accident. Anonymity, of, you don't have to show your face. If a survivor comes on, that's one thing we like to do on the podcast, is to share survivor stories. And it allows us to distort voices if necessary. It's, we can have different actors use voices. So it was a consideration, or a very large podcast, and not just its content, was we need to be helping survivors and also protecting them. And so that's a little background more so on the podcast. We are, although for myself, I've only experienced relationship abuse, and I will own my identity. I am cis, I am straight, I am white, a woman. I recognize that my experience is one only I can speak for, and there are other communities that still experience abuse, that we want to feature, want to explore, want to make sure that that voice is also added, because it can look different across different communities, and it can affect different communities at different rates, at different, in different levels, in different ways. And so that's something even myself, I need to learn more about, and that I do through the podcast. So yeah, I don't know, did I answer your question?
You did. No, thank you very much.
Kind of went on a rant.
I think that's perfect.
Kept going.
Because it's useful to hear like some of the background for why you would start a podcast about relationship abuse, which is not like a really common thing that people would want to do. It's also helpful to hear a little bit about your background and some of the things that have really come about as a result of doing this. So yeah, definitely thank you.
Yeah.
Two quick things before we move on.
Yeah.
One, if you are in chat, feel free to leave any questions that you might have for Sydney or for Carly or for myself. We'll be happy to read them throughout there. You'll also see it is being streamed at the very bottom. Second of all, Sydney, I was doing a quick search on Spotify for Songs of Solace. What is the username that we should be looking for? And then I'll put the URL in chat for anybody who's interested.
Oh, it's probably, wait, I think Spotify is up on this computer, so I will find it. I think it's called Songs of Solace.
Sure.
I think it's under my username. And then it's like Love Is Not Podcast also.
Nice.
I think it is linked on our website, actually.
Okay.
So if you go to loveisnot.org, it should be on our website.
Let me go look for that.
That's awesome. I can't wait to listen to your playlist.
Thank you. Oh, here. Haha.
If you want to toss a link in our thing,
yeah,
we can definitely share it with everybody.
There it is. Amazing. Yeah, and it's definitely, it hasn't been like, not all the songs we're a monthly podcast, so look for us monthly. And I have way more songs than just 12 a year to recommend. So you'll see a lot more songs in there that I have not mentioned yet on the podcast. But it's just kind of like a huge conglomeration. And if you've been in any relationship of any type, there's a song in there for you. So definitely hope you take a listen.
That's great. Yeah, I just put it on the chat in case you are watching this on your phone or watching this on a computer. You can just click the link that's in chat right now, and start listening to some songs of solace.
Yeah.
Anything in
And
particular?
if I can make a plug for one. Yes, you read my mind. The first episode, we were actually able to have the duo Overcoats, which their album Young um, is. They're actually our theme song. Our theme song is "The Fog" by Overcoats, which is it's so perfect to listen to, and it was like a total like pipe dream of mine to have that be the theme song. And then we actually made it happen. Shout out to Adam Joel, who's my producer, who had a connection. He's amazing, the best. And their album Young is like they talk about in the first episode. Very frequently, their listeners will come up to them and say, like, this helped me through an abusive relationship, or like it relates to a lot of survivors, even though it wasn't written as that. Even The Fog, it sounds like it's written about an abusive relationship. It's not. It's about a relationship with a music producer that was toxic. And so it just goes to show that, like, the feeling of that type of trauma, you don't have to necessarily experience a abusive relationship. You still empathize with that feeling. And their whole album is just like such an anthem. For those types of experiences. And so I would definitely recommend the album Young by Overcoats. They also just have like beautiful harmony in their voices. And it's great music too. So would definitely recommend that.
That's awesome. I love them, and I did not realize that all the connection that you just shared. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Listen to that. It's our first episode, so go check it out too. Love is
For sure. And I'll be sure to also put in the chat. Oh, hey, okay.
oh cool.
So there is somebody who just followed Rights and Wrongs podcast. So thanks again for joining. They say, sorry if this is out of place. I joined late. As a fellow cisgender, white, in my case, white male podcaster, I find it challenging talking about at-risk demographics that I'm not a member to. Or I don't want to take away the voice of these groups for talking for them. Do you have any advice on how best to do this?
It's a very good question, especially as somebody who also is a white person that works in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. This is kind of like the ultimate question. I have found even just saying something like that, I think, has been helpful, of at least admitting, and I don't mean to say ignorance in a negative way, but it's an experience that you can't speak to. And so I think even making that distinction, like I did list out my identities very purposefully because I wanted, like, the experience can vary depending on your identities. And I think the more that you can accept that and also show that you care about other communities and you want to ask those questions, you want to learn in a sense of understanding and not in a sense of like fetishizing, as I know that can be, such a deep-rooted issue in at-risk communities. But I think of making a very personal commitment to your own education, not in a performative way as well. So to actually educate yourself, to not just buy the books, to read them and to put them in practice. That is something that I personally have found really helpful. And to kind of just kind of owning it, like admitting it, and not being afraid to wear those identities and accept the fact that it does in some ways separate you. And it just means that you have to put in the effort to connect on those experiences, the community that you don't represent.
I think that's some great advice.
Bit of a ramble, but
No. I actually think it's really good advice. Something that I've also heard as I've been talking to people who are in communities that I'm not a part of, or identities that I don't hold, is to use any identities that you do have that will give you an edge or give you some level of privilege to amplify the voices that they don't have. And so that could just be as simple as talking to the people that you're finding, people that you that do identify in those demographics or have those demographics, just understanding their stories. So in addition to reading the books themselves, maybe just go straight to a person if you happen to have access to them, and then just amplify their voice. During like the summer riots and stuff like that, when people were blacking out social media and it was a bit performative, there were a lot of people who still wanted to echo and amplify the voices of Black people. And so, how could you do that if you are not somebody who is Black, but still holds a maybe a ethnic identity or something, or racial identity that like is is able to like break through the social zeitgeist really in a way. And can you be able to take that and that same message that somebody else has given and then push that forward to everybody else? I think that to me is an interesting way to bring it up, because while yes, like you don't have that experience, you can still take somebody's experience and then make other people like pay attention to that.
Yeah, I think a really fantastic social media example of that, and I'm so sadly blanking on her last name, but her handle is Generous, spelled with Jenorous or yeah. I'm gonna look it up.
Sure.
She's a queer woman who does just a Jen Winston, I think. Yeah. She does like a fantastic job. Yeah, it's Jenerous. And her name is Jen Winston. She's a queer woman and um, is actually very vocal about being, I believe she identifies as bisexual, and is very vocal about that, and being a part of the LGBT community, blah, 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 community. And she also has done a very fantastic job as a white woman of amplifying the voices of women and other people of color. And she has been like very instrumental for me on that journey of how to understand ways in which you can support people. And I think it's also important, Rajiv, like you had mentioned, of like the Black square to post of really looking internally and thinking, what are like private ways that I can do that aren't public? Like when I'm interacting with people and I'm not on a screen or on social media or the internet, like in person, how, like in the workplace, how can I support people of color? Um, challenging any thoughts that you have about those communities if they might feel biased, which also everybody has bias. It's okay. It's just best to challenge them when you when you come across them. So yeah, that's one person, at least as an example, that I think really does a good job of being an ally, both publicly and privately.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I follow them too, and it's really powerful stuff. And there's so many other people out there doing similar stuff too. That's really great. It's so hard to think at the top of my head. I just want to like go look at my Instagram feed and like name things. But there actually is a really great account for like sobriety. It's called At Recovery for the Revolution. So it's talking about like, all this stuff. I mean, there's so much stuff within the sobriety community of how AA was founded by white men for men, and it's just very pigeonholed. And now in 2021, the recovery community is so vast, and these conversations are reaching people that were never considered as part of this conversation before. So like you said, the first step is just getting educated yourself on this stuff, and then using that information, using the knowledge as power, reaching out to the communities directly that you want to engage with, fully understanding their story before you do anything in terms of using your privilege, which is like the last step of using your privilege to elevate, to tell these stories that are not being told, and using using your platform, letting somebody take over your platform. I love like when I see people that I follow that are doing like a feature where like, oh, they're letting this person take over for the day so that their voice is elevated, so that people are that so that this audience that this white person has created is now being utilized for somebody else in a minority community. So that stuff is really powerful because it's just getting, and that's such an easy thing to do too, where it's just really great to get a new audience's eyes in front of something that had never been, shared or told before to this audience directly.
Yeah.
I think that that's a really interesting thing to keep paying attention to. And thanks for the great question, Rights and Wrong podcast. I hope that that answers a little bit or gives you a bit of food for thought. I think maybe we want to pivot over to
Totally.
something else. Something else that we wanted to talk about in this sort of more casual after show session is what do you think about Valentine's Day? I'm just gonna
You
leave
go
it
first.
super open ended and super wide open for you to respond however you'd like.
Yeah. Um, I don't like the commercialization of Valentine's Day. I like I love chocolate. I can't like that's what that holiday means. I just think as someone who was in a relationship and where everybody expects like, oh, it's Valentine's Day. What are you doing with your partner? And like wanting to like tout, like look at how great my partner is. Like if I could give any advice, like don't believe social media pictures. Like I could show you some very pretty pictures, probably from Valentine's Day, of my of my ex partner who was abusive. It's like nope, that's just one picture, just one thing behind. And I think if Valentine's Day was opened up a little bit more, I know Galentine's Day has become a thing, which I think is awesome. I don't like have anything against Valentine's Day, I think. Except like let's like it doesn't no, if you're single on Valentine's Day, you shouldn't feel bad because that doesn't mean that you don't have love in your life. And I think that's what's frustrating. Um, because the emphasis is on like romantic relationship, and it's also like what about self love? Like, it's totally cool to be alone. And if you love yourself, that's something that you like should celebrate. And it shouldn't be embarrassing to be like, oh, it's Valentine's Day. Like, go love yourself. Like, oh my God, I'm such a big Parks and Rec fan. Treat yourself. There it is. Like, it should be a holiday that is more widely celebrated with the people that you love and not just like such a heteronormative idea of Valentine's Day. That's it's not like a big holiday. I think one, to me at least. It's okay if it is for anybody listening. But I think my my favorite Valentine's Day activity that I did was I'm a big Giordano's fan for deep dish, and my partner is a Luminati's fan, and so we did a taste test. So we just ate a bunch of deep dish pizza. Celebrate however you want.
Yum.
For anybody
uh,
coming in from not Chicago, that may mean nothing to you, but it's like the most important
QSS.
thing. Like,
yes, we are like us. I pizza, and we fight, not like fight about it. I'm like, Illuminati has too many tomato chunks. Like, I don't like the crust of Giordano's, and I'm like, this is our biggest fight.
hey, if that's your biggest fight, that's a really good place to be, where it's just about like pizza quality.
Very fortunate for who I found. But yeah, that's at least those are my thoughts on Valentine's Day.
What about you, Carly?
Okay.
Well, I know you, Rajiv, affectionately called it Single Awareness Day, which you can tell us more about. Sydney, you made me think of, I'm pretty sure one of those two pizza places does heart-shaped pizzas, or I know that like heart-shaped pizzas are like all the rage for February. I mean, I love Valentine's Day because I'm like a hopeless romantic. And I love, pink is my favorite color, and I love like hearts and all that fun stuff. I don't know. And it's like I love love. I love romantic comedies, like, and it's just cheesy. But I agree that like giving yourself self-love or just doing whatever you want on Valentine's Day is very cool, especially this year. Like I'm single, so it's gonna be me, myself, and I, which it's been every day for the past year of quarantine. So like gonna try and find like one tiny way to like make it a little bit better or like treat myself, like you said. So I don't know. I get think what you said super valid that nobody should make you feel any type of way on Valentine's Day. Like there's no reason to be ashamed or feel like lonely, but if you do feel those things, like you're not alone and it's okay and you're like we're all in the same boat, honestly. So That's all I have to say about it. What about you, Rajiv?
Well, part of the reason I was calling it Singles Awareness Day is because of so much the level of pressure that is put on Valentine's Day as a very like specific day. And to me, it feels like it's it's like a little bit over the top because I don't know, like maybe I'm the opposite of a hopeless romantic or somebody that's a different type of hopeless romantic who's thinking that you could show all of those sorts of things throughout the year or like at any point of the like year itself. It doesn't all have to be like concentrated on one day because to me that feels a little bit too, I don't know. It feels like it adds unnecessary pressure on the relationship, especially if it's new. Like, God forbid you start dating somebody in January. And then, like, in February or something like that, it's like so new and you're still figuring each other out. And you all of a sudden have this like societal pressure on top of you to like make it something lovey dovey or whatever. That to me feels like it's just a bit unnecessary. Of course, I also don't really care for the consumerism. I don't care for like the consumerization of like queer stuff either in June or whatever. So, but I know that corporations got to make some money, business got a business. So, you know, I'm not gonna fault them for playing that game. But at the same time, like I don't think everybody needs to fall into the same traps.
It's like New Year's Eve. I don't know if like for me, I hate New Year's because it's just like time is an illusion. You put so much pressure on this one evening that has to be amazing, and I've never had fun on New Year's Eve. And yeah, Rajiv saying like the pressure it puts on a relationship. Like if you like even people in relationships, if that's not your thing, like I have my eldest sister like doesn't like being hugged, and so like Valentine's Day means nothing to her, even though she has a fiance. And it might not be your thing, and if it is your thing, that's fine too. But
Totally.
also, don't give other couples like, oh, you're not doing anything for Valentine's Day? Do you not love each other? It's like, no, I just eat chocolate every day of the year, so I don't need to do it on the 14th. Or it's just like another day for, like it's, I think just bringing in respect again. Um, just like respecting how you want to celebrate. Like, that's fine. If you want to have, there's a really great stand up comedy bit by Eliza Schlesinger. Um, she is talking about her friend who is having.
Oh no, hey Sydney. I think
Oh
you
no, I
might have
can't hear
cut
her
out.
either.
Yeah, you cut out
Okay.
your audio as soon as
I
you were just like,
know.
"Who
Not
is
a
this
good
person?" I
one.
was like waiting with bated breath. Who are you talking about? What is this comedy thing?
Oh no.
Do you want to try again?
I had
Still can't get you yet
technical technical difficulties.
on
Oh, it's
Sydney's
so
end.
strange. Like right in the middle as you were talking.
Right. But you can hear us
Oh,
apparently
I'm
then
like,
still.
yeah.
Yeah.
I bet that to my
Okay.
seat. I want to know what she's gonna say.
Yeah, me too.
Hmm,
Well, nothing.
yeah. All right. Well, hopefully we can get you back online with us.
Or just like somehow find a way onto Twitch and just type your message out in chat.
Oh no. It's okay. This happens.
It does.
Tech issues.
This is the fun part of doing stuff completely over the internet with like a a guest onto our thing. Like totally cool. Like you're good.
Oh,
Uh,
well, I definitely want to know if there's anyone in the chat that wants to weigh in on thoughts on Valentine's Day. Please share with us in the meantime. But yes, Rajiv.
Julie was saying that it's a good question, and then she found it really funny that it was called Single Awareness Day, which, yeah, like,
You can take that in whatever way that you want
right,
it to
exactly.
mean to you for sure. Yeah. I do like the focus being on like other relationships in your life, whether that's like you're telling your family you love them or your friends. And like what both of you were saying is like, why does all the pressure have to come to one day a year? Like, can't we just spread out how we feel about each other like all year long and just like have that be sustainable instead of this like one peak of like this one day a year where we like showcase our love? But I was laughing at Sydney too of like, there's the old adage of, like, however happy your relationship is on social media, like, the more unhappy you are off of social media because you're, like, spending so much time curating what other people are thinking about your relationship, so just food for thought for that, where if you're just having a regular relationship and putting the work in behind closed doors, it's like the energy is gonna like, the effort and the energy is gonna go towards, like, wherever you put it, so if you're putting it towards, like, trying to make this, like, perfect like online fantasy for everybody to see and like think your relationship is amazing like where like while you're posting and doing all that stuff your partner is like sitting on the couch being like are we doing anything tonight for like what's going on so as opposed to like yeah you're not showering your partner with words and pictures and love on social media but like you're behind the scenes in the trenches with them like doing the hard emotional labor doing the work and like building a strong foundation for where your futures are going to go together that's not really like gonna be on social media. So I think about that a lot. I thought you brought that up too, Sydney, so that was funny.
Give her a chance to try one more time, just in case it's back.
I know.
Can you hear me now? No?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, 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 yes. You're back. Awesome.
But I see
Um,
the thing. I literally did nothing.
I know, you're in the mid sentence.
Okay, well, I also tried to put it in the chat too. But I could pick where did I leave off? Where was
you were just about to
Telling us
explain
about
this comedian.
Eliza?
the comedy bit.
Okay. So she's making fun of a friend who is having her wedding on Valentine's Day, and it's like a Valentine's Day themed wedding. And she's like, when and if I get married, I'm gonna get married the day after of Valentine's Day, and my theme is gonna be 75% off chocolate. And I'm like, amazing. That's just like exactly what you need to do because that's what matters. And if you're not a chocolate fan, we can't be friends. But that's okay. I'll forgive you. But yeah, it's just so funny that there's so much pressure that's put on that one day, February 14th, like everybody knows it. But yeah, well, that's my story.
Well, thank you. It was
Moral
well worth the technical difficulties for us to get there, right? So,
Perfect.
well, we had somebody who another chat that came in from Right and Wrong podcast. If you love each other 364 days of the year, it's kind of strange to put all the focus one day as a meter. So yeah, like that. If people are saying like, oh, you're not doing something on Valentine's Day, you don't love them, but then they don't ask. Like, first of all, you probably shouldn't ask them that ever, really. Like that's between them two for them to figure it out. But yeah, like that one day is not really a be all end all for everything.
Yeah, it like speaks back to love languages. Like for some people, their love language is like, I'm gonna decorate the entire house and bake you cookies and cupcakes and red balloons everywhere. And some people's love language is like, please God, do not draw attention to the fact that it's like that it's Valentine's Day. Like this is my day, it's not my thing. And it's if the best relationships are when you can communicate that and it's respected and understood. It's okay to like make it's your world, live in it together.
Right. I mean, like, if you don't like something, they should accept that. And if you like something, they should accept that. Like, if you really, really, really like Valentine's Day, like, cool, more power to you. Find somebody else that also likes Valentine's Day just as much as you do, or at least is okay with you liking Valentine's Day that much.
Definitely.
Yeah, or just like do whatever you want. Like
Sure.
if you want a piece of cake or something, like don't expect your partner to like read your mind. Like go make your own fantasy come true for yourself. I'm all about like team just like make it happen. Yeah, yes, communicate. Yes, it's fine. Like I think Rajiv and I differ a little bit on how we feel about like big romantic gestures. I am very much like, well, I think now that I'm sober, like I get to be super creative and I love doing like surprises and I love doing like really thoughtful gifts that my partners like could never reciprocate because it's so extra. Like so that's my love language. But that's so not like your vibe. It's just you have to communicate that. You have to know each other's styles. So, like I would not do a crazy giant grand romantic gesture for Rajiv because I know he would die inside slightly. So you don't want to do that.
Exactly.
But if I want to do it for myself, then I'll go ahead. If that's what I want, and I'm like, I can give it to myself. I don't have to expect all of this to come from a partner, or I could have good friends that know that about me that set something up for me. So it's all does not have to like come to this like magical point of like there needs to be this everything on this one day. Like that's so not realistic society.
No. And I totally type thing because I want to be Leslie Knope. Like I want I always say like I want to ruin your life with this gift. Like I want to make it like and I go all out. I have like
That's me.
lists that I keep of like as soon as they oh my god, it was so funny. I was watching, I'll make sure he doesn't listen. We were watching a T show. uh I'll go into it. He'll find out. He's gonna find out soon, anyways. We were watching Silicon Valley, and there's a mug that is Guilfoyle's. And we are not Satanists like Guilfoyle. There's a mug that says like drink coffee, hail Satan or something. And
Okay.
my partner said like, oh, I want that mug, and immediately I pull out my phone and I'm like, there's on Etsy, done. Happy Valentine's Day. Like if you say that you like something, I will record it, I will remember, and it will be your next gift. Because that's just the way I like to show my love and show that I'm listening. Like I listen to what you say, and I love coming up with. I will offer this service if you need help coming up with gifts for people. Please ask me. I love doing it. It's so much fun. So much fun.
That's amazing. I mean, to me, that is, I'm like, I very much appreciate people who put in that effort. However, that's something that feels like super exhausting to me in the sense of just like having to like literally sit on every word that somebody says or something really small. Which, I mean, if that comes naturally to you and that's something that you're actually energized by, like, go for it. But 100% not me. Like,
Yeah, I'll like pick up on those small like details, and I think also because it probably like comes from anxiety, honestly, is what it is, which not the healthiest, I'll admit that. Of like I want this to be good. Like I want I want to show that I love this person. This is part of my love language, and I want it to be good. So I've like trained myself on how to make thoughtful gifts. And it doesn't always it's like it's not monetary, it's like the thought behind it, right? Like I don't need a yacht, but if you buy me a book that I really appreciate, like that's great. Or like a handmade something, like it's the thought that counts. And I just have to put in a lot of thought, and it just kind of like comes naturally to me. And I can tell you also, it does not come naturally to my partner. So not that he's a bad gift giver, but I always win. I'll put it that way. And it's always super interesting because my birthday is at the end of June and he's the middle of July, so he has to follow me up every year.
Oh man.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. But yeah, I mean, it really all just comes down to like the communication with your partner. Like he knows this about me. I've disclosed this with him. It's not like I just do this and sit there and then expect on my birthday or like on Hanukkah or the holidays, like what gift are you going to give me? It's like this isn't something I expect in return, and I've communicated that with him. So yeah, it all comes down to again that love language of like, let's be on the same page. And with Valentine's Day.
Julie from chat just said,
Totally.
I have a spreadsheet of birthdays and gift ideas. So relatable, Carly. And also for Sydney, I'm sure. Like, if you have a spread, I mean, I'm a
Yes,
big fan of
totally.
spreadsheets, but like gift spreadsheets and things like that seems a bit excessive to me as an individual. But like, I totally see it and I get it.
And that's valid for you too.
Really. And I like what you were saying, Sydney, too, of like just because you're different from your partner, like you can learn from each other. Like if you can teach your partner this like skill that you have and like help them level up in their life because they're gonna have to give gifts to other people in their life and they could really like improve that if that's an area that they like want to learn more about. And that's like a cool part about like couples that have like different skill sets or different strengths. You can kind of pull from each other's like idea box, really pick their brain about stuff and just like, use that to better your own life. So that's pretty cool too.
100%. That's something my partner has done. Like he heard me talking about this book series that I wanted to buy, and I actually bought it for myself. And then for the holidays, he gave me like the whole set. And so I have like all of these duplicates of these books. And he's like, around. And so we now have set a ground rule of like around the holidays or birthdays, cannot talk out loud to each other about things we want to buy, because then I think you're dropping a hint or I'm trying to learn from you of like like picking out gifts from what you say. So it may have backfired, but it was a great learning lesson of like, okay, now we've agreed, we have to be careful around each other of like declaring that we want to buy something or something that we want for ourselves around those times of the year.
That's amazing. And
Funny.
by the way, here's a really great place, like an hour and a half into a podcast, a video podcast that you'll have to look at like on Twitch or YouTube to find. So if you want to drop some gift hints here, you know that this is a safe place to do so.
Yes, definitely.
Love that.
Oh yeah. Oh, gifts for him or for
Or gifts for you that you're just waiting to drop a hint on because it's not a holiday.
oh.
Like you're not actually near your birthdays. And you know that he'll have to find it here.
That's true. Yeah, he probably. Well, I'll see if I make him.
That's so funny.
Yeah, I mean, any vinyl is good for me if you know an album. That's always you gotta. It's also good to like communicate that with partners too. If you are expecting gifts of like, I really like vinyls, like like directing that to them if you need to drop a hint. But yeah, that's cool.
That's awesome.
Because I swear the expectations are killer. Like, same thing for holidays or even just for Valentine's Day of like, okay, like, are we getting each other gifts? Are we getting each other an item, a food item, an experience, ticket to something? Like, what is the vibe here? Like, just, it doesn't have to be like, okay, we're just like going to be hush hush about it. Like, no, that never works out. More communication, the better. Like, you can,
Yes.
like, our society is so strange. Like, we expect like everything to just be like just be able to read each other's mind, and that's not really feasible. So like don't do what society tells you. Talk about things. It's okay if it's not a surprise, but if it's something you both really want, that's even better than a surprise sometimes.
Yeah, it's just like that communication. I know, like, I'm going to be that person that just references stand up all the time, but there's a great John Mulaney segment about his wife, who is a Jewish woman, and he was raised Irish Catholic, which is the same dynamic between me and my partner. I am Jewish, and he is Catholic. And like when you are dating a Jewish woman, stereotypically, very open about how we're feeling, like my stomach hurts and that's what's wrong, and I'm gonna tell you what is wrong. And it's so helpful to just not be passive aggressive about it and be like I'll have turned to my partner, and I'll say this to my friends sometimes too, like we're going somewhere and I'm not in a good mood, I'll be like, hey, I'm just gonna let you know I'm in a really bad mood, so that's how I'm gonna be at this event. Like just to like clue them in so you're not wondering, like, was that a hint? Are they okay? Like it's okay to just come out and say it. And that's a good boundary to set too.
Absolutely. And a good place to maybe end this episode because we are coming up on
Yeah.
5:30 Central. Thank you again so much, Sydney, for joining us. So for those who weren't able to catch the podcast earlier, you can definitely take a look on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you want to find your podcasts. It will be up in insert number of days here. So we just got to go ahead and edit things down, and then you'll be able to find it on there. But otherwise, you can definitely watch the rest of this video. It will be available for a couple weeks on Twitch and available in perpetuity on YouTube, as far as I understand. So thank you also for those who are joining us in chat. and for our new followers. Really do appreciate it. If you are watching, if you want to just give us a like on YouTube or you want to hit the follow button on Twitch, that helps us out a lot as well, just to be able to share this with everybody. And it's a really easy, you can see, like if you listen to this, it's a really easy podcast to share with others. So feel free to do so. We keep it chill because it's Queer Sober and Social. So thank you again for joining us. Carly, Sydney, anything that you might want to end with?
Thank you again, Sydney. This has been such a pleasure. It's so fun chatting with you. Thank you for all your knowledge that you shared with us. It's invaluable. So glad to have you today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. This was awesome.
Oh, and by the way, quick shout out. Coming shortly enough, I think we're going to have us join you on your podcast, correct?
Yes.
Definitely.
Yes, I'm so excited. Hopefully we record next week. But for the followers of Queer Sober Social, you'll also be able to hear the beautiful voices of Carly and Rajiv on the Love Is Not podcast. So I'm excited to keep chatting with you both. And hopefully our followers will also enjoy it.
Yeah, for sure.
Woo!
Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining. Thanks again for listening or for watching in this section. And then thanks again for listening. So check out Love Is Not if you haven't already, somehow or other, with the links that we threw in chat. And then if you want to, you can check out our merch if you just check out our merch store. Otherwise, we will see you in a couple weeks. So thanks again, everybody. Take care.